My name is Mateo. I'm from Seville, from a little street near the docks, where it always smells of fish, sweat, and wine. My mother used to say I was born under the cry of a seagull, and my father claimed it was to the sound of a mug smashing. They're both long gone now, so there's no one left to argue that I've lived by the sea since I was 15. At first, I carried barrels, then scrubbed the decks on a small boat, and eventually I got onto a real ship. Not because I was skilled, just because I had a strong back and kept my mouth shut. I'm not the kind to argue with the captain. I listen, I work, and I survive. When I heard some Genoese man was looking for crew to sail across the ocean, out where the maps turn white and the sea supposedly falls into the void, I didn't think twice. Some called it madness. I thought, what do I have to lose? All that was left for me in Seville was weariness and empty pockets. And that's how I ended up on the Santa Maria, the largest of the three ships, setting sail from Palos de la Frontera. Huge, at least for someone like me, used to fishing boats. The captain, Cristoforo Colombo, didn't look like a sailor, more like a monk lost in a storm. But there was something in his eyes, a kind of stubbornness that made you believe he could bend the ocean to his will. I didn't know what I expected from the journey. Gold, adventure, death, maybe a little of everything. But now, looking back, I see this. The world changed. And so did I. I saw him while we were still ashore. He stood apart from the others, dressed in dark clothes, hands clasped behind his back, silent, as if counting something in his mind. His gaze was fixed on the horizon, as though he already saw the lands we had yet to discover. Columbus didn't look like a sailor. There was something monk-like about him, a quiet focus and stubborn faith. He didn't shout or wave his arms, but when he spoke, everyone listened. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to know what kind of man dared such a thing that I didn't fully trust him. But there was something about him that made you want to follow. Maybe that's why we set sail. Not for gold, not for glory, but for this strange man who walked as if he knew the way through the dark. The first days at sea felt strange. The land disappeared beyond the horizon, and only the ocean remained. Endless, gray, breathing. The wind was gentle, the waves calm, and it seemed as though the sea god himself had allowed us to depart. Work moved along as usual. Some scrubbed the deck, others went below to the hold, and the rest hoisted the sails. Everyone knew their place, yet from time to time, eyes drifted to the captain. He stood motionless, like a rock, as if he had no doubts at all. I was haunted by a strange feeling. Not fear, more like a quiet weight pressing on the chest. The world had shrunk. The ship was our home, the sky, our roof, the ocean, everything else. And no one knew what lay ahead. Weeks passed. We kept moving forward, yet all around us was the same unchanging sea. No birds appeared, no sign of land. Some began to whisper that we had gone off course. Others claimed Columbus was leading us to our doom. At night, arguments echoed through the hold. One sailor accused another of stealing water in secret. Someone cursed the navigator, saying he was hiding something. The tension thickened like fog before a storm. I kept to myself, but something stirred inside me too. Maybe we truly were sailing into a void. But what now? Turn back or go on? We were already too far to choose without fear. Just when we had nearly lost faith, a bird appeared, small and black. It flew past the mast and vanished into the clouds. Someone shouted, and we all looked up. It was the first sign life was near. The next day, someone spotted a branch in the water, green leaves still fresh. Then flower petals. The wind shifted, and the air smelled different, warmer, sweeter. There was new light in every gaze. Columbus stood at the bow like a statue, but his eyes were shining. For the first time, I thought, maybe he doesn't know where we're going. And the thought was as refreshing as a sip of cool water in the heat. It happened at dawn. I was still half asleep when I heard a voice. At first, I thought it was a dream. But then it came again, louder, breaking with emotion. Land. I jumped up and ran to the deck. Sailors were already crowding by the railing, some climbing the mast. And there, in the pink mist of morning, a dark line appeared. Everyone shouted, laughed, some even wept. I stood in silence. There was something hot and heavy in my chest. We had sailed for weeks for this moment, and now it was before us. Land, and a new chapter of the world. We stepped on ashore, and the world around us was unlike anything we knew. The sand was white as flour, and the palm trees rose higher than any trees I had ever seen. The birds were vibrant, like colors from a dream. The locals approached us cautiously. They didn't run, didn't attack, just watched. One of them handed me a fruit, juicy, sweet. I had never tasted anything like it. It was a miracle. I looked at Columbus. He stood tall, proud like a king. But I saw more. The world had changed, and so had I. But the miracle didn't last. Over time, our men grew impatient. They demanded more food, gold, obedience. And when they didn't get it, they took by force. I saw one of ours strike a local boy. Others laughed. I burned inside. This wasn't the journey I had dreamed of. One night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the stars and wondered. We were the first to arrive here. But were we also the first to break this place? We returned to the ship in silence. The palm trees stood behind us like guardians of another world. Some turned back for a final look, whether in longing or relief, I couldn't tell. On the deck, the creak of wood, the cries of gulls, the rustle of sails filled the air again. Everything felt familiar, yet I knew I was no longer the same. I sat by the railing, watching the shore fade into the distance. We were sailing back, but I knew a part of me would remain there forever. The sea did not welcome us right away. A few days after departure, a storm struck. The wind tore at the sails, and waves pounded the hull so hard it felt like the ship might split apart. We worked until we dropped, bailing water, pulling ropes, praying. Some shouted to the heavens, some stayed silent. I just held on for as long as I could. When the storm finally calmed, we were exhausted but alive. A rainbow appeared in the sky, a sign that everyone took as a blessing. We sailed on, heading home, toward another shore. But our hearts had changed. When we finally saw our homeland's shore, I could hardly believe my eyes. People waved from the docks, church bells rang. To them, we were heroes. But I didn't feel like a hero. I was just a sailor who had seen something beyond understanding, something that cannot be put into words. I brought back not gold, but memories and the shadow of another world in my heart. That evening, when I set foot on land, I breathed the air of home like it was my last breath. Because I knew, once you've been to the edge of the world, you're never the same again.